Hello everyone, and welcome back to another soft-spoken Wednesday here in the Mystery Theory. Today we're going to talk about something that was requested a lot for some time, and I really didn't want to get into it because there is so much information out there and so many YouTube videos, so many channels that cover this. But you guys requested this in my channel, who happens to be an ASMR channel. So I'm going to try to share today's case in a very respectful way, as always, but also respectful of your feelings and your beliefs, and I'm gonna try to keep my opinions to myself on this one because it involves politics, a little bit of the Civil War, the stand of the character, for lack of a better word, in the story, and it also is kind of an English not English history lesson, that it's going to be concise, to the point, and sharing facts that you can Google and learn for yourself. I am sure that a lot of you know exactly the details of this, but because I don't want to find myself in a rabbit hole and upset people, that we all, can think differently. We are entitled to it. I decided to try to make it as concise and as short, with the right amount of information. So today we're going to talk about the man who shot Lincoln. Now, this is a guy, for those of you who don't know much about him, pretty sure most of you do. He was a stage actor, and I'll give you the details, but just a big picture. He was somebody who dreamed of immortality, like being one of those guys that will be remembered forever and ever. I think most of us want that, but he wanted that in a twisted way. Very twisted way. And with a horrible agenda. So keep that in mind as I go through the details. Now, his name was John Wilkes Booth, and he was born in Bel Air, Maryland in 1838. His family was well known for their careers as stage actors. In particular, his father, Junius Brutus Booth, who was very well known not only in the US but also in Great Britain. And his older brother, and Edwin Booth, who was part Hamlet and a lot more other productions, important productions. They were very good at what they did and well known as a family overall. When John was only 17 years old, he joined the family business, for lack of a better word. And he was pretty popular and was pretty busy. He participated in Shakespeare productions and many more that, again, are very well known. At the time, they were dealing with a debate over slavery. So it was around the 1850s, and most of his family supported the Union. But John didn't want to support that cause, and he made it very clear that he supported the Confederate cause, and he even joined the militia in 1859. I think that with what he was doing, he was showing his support. But I don't know, because when he was supposed to take part of the fight for his cause or what he believed in, he didn't. So he didn't really participate when the Civil War broke out. Instead, he continued with his career in theater, and let me say that he was pretty successful and was making good money. But even though things seemed to be good for him, he started to suffer from depression. And top of that, it was, the South was seemingly going to lose for him, and in his head, all that was really weighing him down. So, to get his spirits up, he decided to come up with a plan, a big one. And it only took him about 6 months, but it was in between the years 1864 and 1865. Now, his idea was to abduct President Lincoln and take him to Richmond, Virginia. He wasn't alone. I mean, you only have to have a crazy idea so you can find some crazy people to follow it or believe in it. So he had 6 other guys involved. And they decided to execute their idea on March 17th, 1865. But the president was supposed to be in the outskirts of Washington, D.C. in some kind of an event, but his plans changed and he never went there. So a few weeks later, after the Union Army captured Richmond on April 3rd, he decided that was not going to be good enough for him. He wanted to scratch that idea that he had with his friends and that they planned for 6 months, and that he could come up with something better, bigger. So he planned to get rid of the president instead. On April 11th, Lincoln gave a speech and John didn't agree with it. He was completely opposed to it, and you probably know what the speech was about. So he told one of his friends, now, quote, "By God, I'll put him through. This is the last speech he will ever make." I mean, the 16th president of the United States of America wasn't even enough for him and his ego. So he decided to add a few to the list. One of them was the Vice President, Andrew Johnson, Secretary of State, William Seward, Secretary of War, Edwin Stanton, and General Ulysses Grant. So, since they could not do it in phases, they decided that they were going to divide and conquer. So on April 14th, two of his accomplices, Louis Thornton Powell and David Harold. David was a pharmacist assistant. I mean, pretty regular, quote-unquote, normal people, if you will. They were going to go to Secretary of State, his home of William Seward, and they were going not only for him, but for 3 others. Another accomplice, George Atzerodt, who was a carriage repairman, was assigned to the Vice President Johnson, but I mean, in the end he retracted and he said that he couldn't do it. Now for Stanton and Grant, we don't have, or at least on my research I couldn't find if they had other people that were going to do it and we just never learned about them, but kind of left out of the list. So after 10 p.m. John entered the presidential box in the Ford's Theater and nobody noticed him. I mean, I understand this was a very long time ago. Right now, if you try to get close to a president, yeah, you don't do that. But on top of that, nobody noticed him, and he was also carrying a small gun that was not noticeable. He pointed to his brain and pulled the trigger, and then jumped to the stage. Now I have to tell you that what I'm about to tell you seems like a scene from an action movie that, you know, it probably would involve some kind of a very athletic guy, because, I mean, it's just, you know, not only the fact that he got through and he, you know, find the way to find the president, carry the gun with him, but then his exit was kind of one of those things that you see in movies that you're like, nah, that would not happen in real life. Well, before that, he shouted, "Sic temper tyrannis, thus always do tyrants," which is the motto of the state of Virginia. I thought I should mention that. He then ran down the back stairs to a waiting horse and fled to the countryside. Sadly, Lincoln died the next morning at 7:22 a.m. President Lincoln, of course. His body was taken to Springfield, Illinois for burial. And it's one of those images or one of those pictures or one of those things that gets stuck in your head when you see it. How people line the railroad's track to view, you know, the funeral train. I mean, this was unreal. One thing is to even think about it, but another thing is to actually see it, you know, like it worked for this guy. And he took down one of the most powerful men in, I mean, the world. And a leader, and if, you know, the president was not safe, I mean, this was such a horrible time for the US, and it was just hard to see how people were so devastated by, of course, the loss of a president, but a human being, somebody that they believed in. And it was described as a very unreal thing. This cannot be happening. 2 weeks later, on April 26th, 2 weeks later, it kind of, it's mind boggling, just the idea. But Union soldiers tracked down John Booth, who was hiding in a farm, and he was in particular in a barn that they set on fire, and he ended up being shot when he refused to surrender as he was coming out. His body was identified by several people and confirmed that it was him. But there is this something that the internet calls a myth that he actually escaped and that it wasn't him. Now, nowadays, some people still go to the route and drive through the route that he took to go to the farm after the horrible thing that he did. But it's just one of those things that the event, the places, the people, one of those one of a kind parts of history that was not only horrible and sad and shouldn't have happened, but people today are still fascinated by, some of the details. Now, I'm gonna, again, keep my thoughts to myself, but there are a few things that I thought I should probably mention in case that you didn't know. It involves a landlord that ended up getting in trouble. I mean, you'll see. Now, before I move on to that, John Wilkes Booth was buried in his family plot in the Greenmount Cemetery in Baltimore, Maryland. But his grave remains unmarked. This was a request that his family did when he was buried. Now, Mary Surratt, she was the landlady that was renting a room for John, and she was executed for her role. Apparently, John and his accomplices planned the whole thing at her boarding house. And some people believe that this was very unfair because just because she was renting part of her house doesn't mean that she was involved. But according to my research, she did a bit more than that by holding guns and supplies for the guys. So, did she know what they were planning? Yes, no, really. But she was holding those guns, and so she was executed. And to end with a better note, Anderson Ruffin Abbott was one of the doctors attending the president. He was the first Black Canadian licensed as a doctor who happened to be a personal friend of Lincoln. Now, that is all the basic information and that I thought that I should share about this. Again, I don't want to create any kind of discussions or anything politically related. Before President Lincoln was a president, he was a human being, and we discuss true crime cases in my channel every week, and they're all humans too, and they're all people who deserved much better, yet their lives are cut short. In this case, I feel like it was more shocking because of who he was, what he represented, and how many people believed in him at the time. This is also part of history that no matter how much we don't want to think about and how much we want to believe that we have everything under control, it's just one of those things that it always makes you wonder. And again, even if you agree with his thoughts and his ideas or not, just the fact that he was a human being who happened to be a job that it's not liked by many people. And not because it was him, but because being a president means that a lot of people like you, but a lot of people don't like you. And in the end, this kind of showed how vulnerable we were at the time, how things needed to change. And I think they have. And I'm glad that they did. And I'm glad that presidents now can enjoy that protection that some people agree that, or some people say that it's too expensive, but how cool would that be? To be cared and protected at all times. I always tell my kids that I would never like to be a president, not here, not anywhere. I enjoy my Target walks in the morning whenever I'm having to clear my head and find something silly, a gadget, something that gets my mind out of a problem or thing that I'm thinking about. Being a president means that you kind of lose part of that freedom of being a regular citizen, and you become important, needed, protected, even though that was not the case for today's case. You kind of have to give up a lot of your freedom in order to serve your country. But I have to say that it doesn't make it less sad just because of who you are. We really would never, we don't know more than the information that we can gather around, his life and his beliefs and his views and politics. But wouldn't it be interesting to know why? The real reason why. So was this what I mentioned in the beginning? Was his dream of immortality and people remembering his name? And sadly, we have to, because it's part of history. Really, I don't know. Do you think that he achieved his purpose or his mission of becoming that very well-known person, not only in America but in the world? Let me know what you think about that. Thank you so much for requesting this video. I think this was Anna 7567. I thought that the number was easy enough. So thank you, Anna, for requesting this. And I'll talk to you guys back here on Friday with a new case, still part of the Mystober series. Thanks for being here. Talk to you guys on Friday.